Two U.S. deportation flights have just landed in Guatemala as part of President Trump's ongoing immigration crackdown. CNN's senior national correspondent David Culver joins us now from Guatemala City. So, David, what do we know about these flights?
Hey, Pamela, yeah, you're right. The one that just touched down, I'm going to be very careful what we're showing here because some of the folks have asked that we not show their faces. So sometimes you'll see the camera go down to our feet. But let me give you a sense of the process because you saw them perhaps stepping onto the tarmac, and now they're at the space where you can see these folks in yellow vests who are registering these folks back into Guatemala. So for many of them, it's been years since they've lived here, and now they're trying to figure out the reintegration process. And we're just going to be careful with faces here too. But let me just show you over here. This is where they're walking up and getting any sort of necessities, some snacks, toiletries. They have everything from Crocs to t-shirts, shoelaces, because if you notice, many of them here, I'll show you this right down here, he doesn't have shoelaces on because that's part of the standard procedure for security to remove anything that could be used as a weapon or self-harm. And they've even got toothpaste and some other snacks.
That's the thing that they do when you're in prison. They remove your shoelaces.
See them putting their fingerprints down, and then a lot of them come over this way and they start charging their phones. I'll just move these sticks over here so you can come around here, Jerry. And that's when they're able to then try to finally reconnect with relatives and loved ones who might come to this space to pick them up. Now, as they're being registered in by, you can see this is some of the organizations that are helping in trying to get them sorted and essentially processed back into Guatemala. They'll then come over to this porch and they've got some of their belongings here. I mean, I can see a guitar case. You can see these are almost like potato sacks, Pamela, that have some of their belongings and stapled together. And then inside I've seen everything from Wawa wrappers to CVS receipts, so things that were just in their pockets that they emptied before boarding.
Wow. And you also spoke to the vice president, right, of Guatemala? What did she say?
So the vice president welcomed this group here. It's interesting because they leave the U.S. as criminals because they illegally entered, and so that's now why they're being deported back here to Guatemala. And the vice president made a point to say that obviously this is a complicated situation. She tried to redirect it mostly to the migrants and what their situation is, but I asked about relations between the U.S. and Guatemala, especially for what we saw in the past 24 hours with Colombia. And she said, look, that's Colombia's situation. The U.S. and Guatemala have their own relationships, and she was trying to be very careful in how she navigated that. I also asked, as we kind of walk around here, I want to give you another sense of some of this. I also asked about what's different essentially between what happened the past 4 years under President Biden and what's changed since under President Trump. As far as the numbers and the capacity of folks who have been deported, that has not changed according to the vice president. That's still the same for what we saw under President Biden. In fact, in some cases, it's even gone down a little bit.
How can they make that assessment if Trump has only been in office for 7 days? Are they trying to finesse us here? How can we make that assessment if Trump has only been in office for 7 days? So the numbers are similar based off of a 4-year stretch versus a 1 week stretch. No worries. Let's go back and see what else we can learn from this.
What has changed, though, Pamela, is the use of military flights, and that began last Thursday here to Guatemala, and it's continuing with another military aircraft that will bring another round of deportees here to this airport in about 2 or 3 hours from now.
Yeah, I think that's really important context, that there hasn't been some big change other than, as you point out, the use of military flights. Again, we'll see how this plays out.
My next guest is an Illinois state senator representing the 1st District in Chicago. Javier Cervantes joins us now. Thanks so much for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for having me this morning.
So you hear our reporter there in Guatemala City saying that Guatemalan authorities say that actually the volume of deportation flights have not changed. The kind of flight, they're now military flights, have changed, but not the volume. I wonder, from your perspective, what's different in your view about how these raids are playing out?
Well, Jim, our communities are just, they're living in fear right now. I think that most people are being affected and are soft targets. Working class people, children. You just saw earlier today, they just knocked on this man's door and they just took him, and his family now is suffering and don't know what to do. So that's what's really happening here. It's a lot of fear going on in our communities.
No. It's a lot of illegal criminal activity that's happening inside of the United States of America. And what happens is you guys are protecting and harboring fugitives over in Chicago and all the rest of these sanctuary cities, to where listen, this is happening whether you like it or not. If people are going to interfere, then they're going to pay the consequences. Guatemala, they didn't want to end up like Colombia because they know better and they want to make sure that they maintain great relationships with the United States of America. And it goes without saying that we've been spending our money and our tax dollars, which I don't take this senator or whoever he is, I don't even know who this guy is, I don't take him serious, because he's paid by the American people, by the taxpayers, to serve us. So his salary comes from us, and they're protecting people that don't even have any vested interest in what happens here in the United States of America, largely by which they send a lot of their resources that they make here in the United States of America back to where they came from in order to support families back home. So the American taxpayer dollar is then circulating and then going outside of the United States of America, yet we want to protect people who have committed crimes inside of the United States of America, some very, very egregious. I showed some people that were rapists and pedos and all of that stuff here, right here in y'all communities in the United States of America. One guy just the other day he had committed like 17 different felonies. And so it's time to go home. It's time to go home. America is closed for repairs. And for whatever reason, they're saying that they're living in fear. The only time that I ever really lived in fear was when I was doing something that I wasn't supposed to do.
We just recently had a scare in one of our schools, in our Chicago public schools, where we thought.
And Tom Homan he said that ain't have nothing to do with ICE. That was something completely different that had nothing to do with it. But go ahead. They want to use these fear tactics on these liberal sites to try to incite fear or to spread misinformation so that they can try to keep their demographic and their user base and their voter base together.
That ICE had shown up. Tonight it was secret. It was a secret agency. But people are just very scared right now.
Yeah. What should, in your view, be the response of city officials to this? Should they resist? Should they just stand back? Or should they be taking part?
Well, what we're trying to do our best is get the word out about the laws that we have in Illinois, the protection that we do, educate our communities, and try to be as helpful as we can to help these families out. So it's a lot of what we're doing. So right now we're trying to help people, and we're trying to make people understand what their rights are. I think that's where we really come in, is really educating our communities.
And you know what's so interesting? I have a really, really strong community over in Chicago. Shout out to Danny C. Shout out to everybody that's over there on Chicago Flips Red. The sentiment in the community is that they've spent over somewhere between $600 million and $1.2 billion of taxpayer money, while at the same time, the credit agencies have downgraded Chicago's credit, which means that it costs them more money to pay their bills because they are operating at a deficit. They tried to raise property taxes on the residents, and we're still talking about people that have rights that came over here illegally. Make sure y'all tap into the Patreon. Link is in the description. Also, teach Henley 40% off your first order, plus 20% off for life. I love you guys. I appreciate you. Let me know what y'all think inside of the comments.